Welcome to the Building the Cooperative Classroom podcast, the official podcast of the Johnson & Johnson Cooperative Learning Institute. Welcome to the Building the Cooperative Classroom podcast. With me, as always, is Aaron Fleming.
Buenos dias, mis amigos.
Buenos dias. And Derrick Swistak.
Hey.
You really need to come up with a better entrance than that.
That's it. That's what I got.
And tolerating us right now is a very special guest, Allison Gest, here to talk to us about leadership and cooperative learning. Welcome, Allison.
Hello, gentlemen.
Well, I can tell she doesn't know us if she's calling us gentlemen.
I assumed she was talking to someone else.
So Allison has been a leader in cooperative learning for well over a decade. She has trained hundreds and hundreds of teachers. And she's moved from role as teacher trainer to instructional coach to department chair to assistant principal. And in that role, she has supported teachers' use of cooperative learning. So I thought we would spend a little bit of time getting to talk to Allison and hearing about her journey and eventually hear about the ways that she's found to be most successful in making sure that teachers are using cooperative learning in the classroom. So Allison, talk to us a little bit about how you got involved with cooperative learning.
So I started teaching in 2005, and that same year, my department chair actually asked me to take Brown Book for cooperative learning. I think that Aaron might have been there. I don't remember. But then I started implementing it in my classroom then, I think right away, and things went well, things didn't go well. And then I want to say the next year, or maybe 2007, then was asked to start training. So went and got trained then up with the Johnsons in Minnesota. And then I feel like just kept doing more work and then being able to train teachers then in District 207 and a couple of people outside of the district. And then over time, I think I've probably trained with all of you at some point, which has been awesome. So mostly, I think with Aaron.
Mostly with Aaron. Much to your chagrin.
No, I mean, the first question of the night, I was going to ask, who is your favorite person to train with? But we all know the answer. So we don't have to ask that question.
Derrick Swistak.
It is not Derrick Swistak. No. But I do have a good question for you right out of the gate here, Allison. You talked in your initial experience, once you started going with cooperative learning, that it went well, but then it didn't go well. Talk about that. What'd you do? What did it take?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I remember the first time I did a jigsaw. Like I remember it was in the spring. So part of it too was that fall, I didn't use cooperative learning when I first started teaching that year, and then started it in the spring, and then was using it with obviously the same students that I had for a year-long class. So all I remember was like, okay, I'm going to try jigsaw because that was one of the first things that I remember we learned. And then it just failed miserably. And it was based off of, I think, a group assessment that I wanted to give afterwards, and they just didn't do very well. And most of the time I think it's like, oh, it didn't work. Well, then I'm not going to do it again. But I'm like, no, I got to figure out what went wrong and I got to try it again because my students aren't used to doing something like this. And so I do remember just thinking like, okay, I got to figure out what worked, what didn't work. I remember asking some students that I felt comfortable asking in class then too. And I think it was partly because they were so used to the sit and get that they just didn't even know how to actually work with one another and rely on one another. And so it was like, I remember that group and then trying it multiple times, then again, either a jigsaw or some other cooperative activity. And then they started doing a little bit better and saw that it was actually working for them, that they were benefiting from learning from one another. And then I think that something else that was affirming was that at that time, one of my professors, because I was still doing my master's degree at the University of Minnesota, she came down to watch me teach and gave me really good feedback on noticing that I was actually using cooperative learning in the classroom, and was very proud of me and told me that I just got to keep going with it, that this is not what students are used to, that they're used to very much more of that lecture style, and that this was going to benefit students and me in the long run. And so it was really nice to be able to hear that, obviously from the students then seeing success, but then also from one of my, I guess, professor mentors, that it just then was something I'm like, nope, okay, I'm diving in. I'm going to dive in and we're going to do this and we're going to do this better.
Of the 5 essential elements, Allison, which one was the first one you tried, and which one was the most difficult to have implement?
Oh, Derrick, that's a great question. You're like making like go back like years now thinking about this. Okay, I can tell you the one that was most challenging first, probably. It's always the group processing. I don't know if you've talked about that with other people, but it was because it was always the one that I just never left time for. And I don't want to say like over time, obviously, like I think it helped me once I started going through the training and realized the importance more of that piece and leaving time, especially at the end of an activity. Easiest, I don't know. I think at the time probably was, I'll be honest, probably individual accountability. I think was just trying to figure out then like how is each person going to be involved, where I then could still see then what they were then providing for a group. I'm always thinking about just like the individual accountability of like listening and actually like taking note of what students are doing when they're talking in teams. Like I really appreciated doing a clear project then based off of cooperative learning, and just that 5-minute walk around, which I really learned, I think, from Roger Johnson, was just like take your clipboard and then walk around and tell students like, I'm not going to talk to you. It's our action research project. I want to say I was really looking at the size of the group. I was trying to figure out then like what size really mattered based off of was it 3 or 4, but then also then looking at male and female, of grouping heterogeneously and homogeneously based off of gender, how that worked based off of the number in the group. And I'd have to go back and actually look a little bit more at my research, but I just remember that females felt more comfortable than being in homogeneous groups than in heterogeneous groups. But I did, can I kind of get it off on a tangent here of kind of noting your question related to, I got a clear project, but I just remember walking around then and doing my tally marks and like telling my students, like I'm tracking data. And I was looking at the time, I remember it was encouraging words. And students obviously were picking up on it, but it was really nice because you're talking about that piece of like, sometimes it's that initial mechanical movement of like, it's really not, you look at the students and be like, they're just doing it because I told them to do it. But then I really loved seeing over a quarter, over a semester, that even when I stopped actually collecting data, they were still doing it. Like they were still contributing. I could still see then like students were accountable for, one another. I don't know. I guess I'm getting all around like almost all 5 of our piece of pig space here. But yeah, I mean, the heart of, I think, the work, though, is still the positive interdependence. I was just listening to Aaron talk about that actually the other day. And it was just like nice reaffirming of all the different pieces that come with a positive interdependence. Because I feel like if you don't have that, then I don't know what you have. Then I know we talk about the difference between group work and cooperative learning and the importance of having all 5 essential elements involved. But I really think that if you don't have that positive interdependence, then I kind of thinking like, well, then what are you doing with cooperative learning? So
yeah, I was in a classroom today. It's interesting that you mentioned that too. I was in a classroom today and it was very clear that kids were developing positive interdependence in this group, and that's why that group was very successful, because the group mates were supporting one another and really building that interdependence with each other. And then you had other groups that were really struggling through that. So like if as a teacher, as the practitioner, you don't think that through and you're not really trying to build that in there, it's difficult for some groups to get there.
Did you say you were observing that in another class?
Yeah, it was just a class that I was in, and nothing, all the groups were doing something, but it was just interesting that some groups were more interdependent than others. And it was really, you could tell by their questions, you could tell that they just had that relationship.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What kind of feedback did you give to the teacher?
We talked a little bit about like what were the pieces that worked well for that group and why did it work well? And were those kids that knew each other really well? Were those kids that didn't know each other so well? Was it kids that, typically study together? Like what was the thing?
That's good though. I mean, right. I think that's the part, is making sure that the teacher sees what was working. If they didn't notice themselves, if like you pointed it out, then again, it's that noticing that there's cooperative learning that's going on in the classroom and pointing out where do you see it actually embedded within a certain group versus another group, and then like why did that work well versus other groups not working well. So that's awesome.
This is a great spot to pause our conversation with Allison Gest. I apologize for some of the echo that you were hearing in the recording. We diagnosed it, so parts 2 and beyond will be echo-free. But until then, let's cooperate.
Thank you for listening to the Building the Cooperative Classroom podcast, the official podcast of the Johnson & Johnson Cooperative Learning Institute. Please check out the show notes for all relevant links, including a link to our Twitter account and the Cooperative Learning Institute webpage. This podcast is copyrighted under the Creative Commons license, copyright 2021. Theme music courtesy of Jimmy Ryan.